Hello, how are you?
Hello, all you people out there. This is my review of Callisto's last piece of DLC. Only story content. But anyway, we're here, and I think everyone's been waiting for this, right?
No!
Well, you know, I was, so sue me.
Do not sue me.
Look, at this point, I think I've just kind of accepted that I'm like the only person left on Earth that likes this game, and that's okay, because you know what? I'm used to being alone. Anyway, before we get into this video, I just wanted to drop a big fat spoiler warning. If anyone still cares, they probably don't. But I wanted to do it anyway, okay? I wanted to be nice. I thought it'd be a nice thing to do. Even if you don't care, I'm just a nice person, okay? So anyway, we're gonna get into this. So just hold on to your butts there and press play. Press play! Okay, good. Alright.
The Callisto Protocol has been a game centered around much debate and equal, or if not more, hate since its launch last December. Although I can understand a lot of the complaints many people had with the title, I personally managed to mostly enjoy my time with it despite its flaws. Since release, I've beaten it, I think 3 times and returned to it for all of their content drops, even though they were severely lacking. I suppose that the marketing and backing it had from industry vets that worked on the original Dead Space really didn't help with its reception. The game looked like it was going to be the next big horror hit, but, well, we all know now, it missed that mark. Now, it was clearly trying to replicate that Dead Space experience in its tone, setting, and atmosphere. I mean, it literally had writing on the walls that said shoot the tentacles instead of shoot the limbs. I mean, come on, like how on the nose can you get? However, it did take a swing in an original direction in the form of its melee combat system that many people felt was half-baked. It was a good starting point, but they needed to add more seeing how the game was focused on melee and it was over 8 hours long. The thing with Dead Space is it's so unique that it stands the test of time for its innovative gameplay and lore. So, trying to replicate something like that with mechanics that weren't fully fleshed out was always going to lead to these really harsh criticisms. Even if some were a little too harsh, I mean, let's face it, a lot of people took it way to the extreme. It's certainly not the worst game I've ever played, and if you think this is the worst game you've ever played, you need to play more games. It did have its moments of greatness, and alas, the final content drop and only story DLC for this game is here. Final Transmission attempts to bring closure to Jacob's story and manages to add some cool elements and quality of life improvements that would have made the base game way more enjoyable for a lot of people. I honestly think I enjoyed this 2-hour experience overall more than I did the base game. You were already warned for spoilers, and yes, this is in-depth, and we're starting with the story. So Final Transmission starts when Jacob is abruptly woken up by Caitlin Mahler, the doctor that was in the base game, insisting that Jacob hurry to her lab where the two can regroup. He arrives there to, of course, not find her physical body, but she's a hologram instead. She explains that while Danny successfully escaped with evidence linking Warden Cole to Black Iron, she only got a piece of the whole pie. Because of this, Mahler wants Jacob to collect the rest of her data drive so they can fully expose Cole. Doing this requires him to go deep into the prison once again, which will ultimately lead to one remaining ship where the two can escape. Now, upon these drives are various confessions of the doctor's experiments she did with the biophage under Warden Cole's authorization. I think that these audio logs do a pretty good job of humanizing Mahler more. While she's clearly a terrible person for her unethical behavior, she struggles with the guilt of her actions because in partaking in her research, she crossed moral barriers in the pursuit to play God. She feels terrible about her involvement, but she never really blames anyone else in an effort to pass the guilt. As Jacob makes his way deeper into the prison, it kind of becomes unclear whether or not he's slowly losing his mind or if his biometric data chip is causing him to have repeated hallucinations. Mahler seems to brush these occurrences off like she knows what's happening, but Jacob gets the sense that there is something else going on. Environments start to shift, voices linger in the back of his head, and he begins seeing threats that aren't actually there.
Jacob, Elias.
It seems to draw a parallel between his descent into Black Iron and his descent into Madness. An angle that I honestly found refreshing because the base game severely lacked these moments even though they played them up in the first hour of the game. Not only does it make for some entertaining moments, but it makes the player start to ask questions. Because of this, it's hard to know what's real and what's fake, but those questions will be answered soon. Once Jacob has attained the last data drive, he makes his way to the loading bay only to be greeted with an infected Mauler. Now, I for one was not expecting that at all. After defeating her, Jacob finds his way onto a ship, only to find it's his ship. It's his ship that he came to Callisto in, the one that now lies on the surface of the planet in pieces. So, just what the hell is going on here? Well, the big reveal is that Jacob has been on the verge of death this entire time, and the goal we as the player have been chasing has merely been in his lucid state of mind from the blood loss, I'm assuming, and the trauma. We weren't searching Black Iron, we were searching what's left of Jacob's mind for missing data because Danny and Jacob's rigs still have an open connection to each other. Mauler found what was left of him from the crumbling Warden's Tower and dragged him back to her lab so she could give Danny the remaining data. So this is definitely not the ending I was expecting. I honestly liked Jacob as a lead, many people didn't, but I wanted him to continue in that role for future games, but I honestly don't think there will be a sequel. It kind of wraps everything up, right? Black Iron's gone, and so is most of the biophage, I'm assuming. Jacob is dead, and Danny now has everything she needs to expose Cole. I don't know what else they could really do with another game, and that kind of sucks. I very much dislike endings like these because it kind of makes the journey feel redundant. No matter what we did, Jacob was going to die, and I don't really think Danny needed any more evidence to back her case. Maybe this was all planned from the get-go, but I think Striking Distance Studios saw the reception of the game and just decided to shelve it. Now, with the story out of the way, luckily this expansion did manage to add much needed quality of life improvements like walking while being able to play audio logs finally, a new weapon in the form of the kinetic hammer.
Yeah, I found this hammer. So this is, it's not as cool.
And a psychological horror angle, which is the only benefit from Jacob's condition, and also, of course, a new enemy type. An infected security unit called the Biobot. Now, the gameplay for Final Transmission is relatively unchanged for all the people that had a problem with it. You're still shooting, dodging, and swinging, but this time around it focuses more on an action-heavy approach. Ammo is rarely scarce, making guns a way more viable option. If you're actively looting, you should have no problems keeping a steady reserve of ammo. This DLC is pretty chaotic at times, and it's really not afraid to throw a lot of enemies at you at once. Don't believe me? Look at this. The kinetic hammer is a much needed improvement over the security baton, and unlocking it coincides with the introduction of the Biobot as an enemy type.
Wait.
Why wasn't that in the base game?
Unlike the base game where you simply just evaded the security units, you actually have to fight these guys, and it's kind of terrifying. The downside is that these enemies more or less attack the same way that the biophage do. They have one power-up attack that's different, but doesn't really do much in terms of variety. I get that the way they built their melee system kind of backed them into a corner with what they could do, but it's really unfortunate. The kinetic hammer does have a unique attack option as a charge-up ability with a wide area of effects done, and that's pretty cool. But because the combat is so up close and personal, it was really hard for me to find an opening to use it most of the time without taking a hit. And I played on maximum security, so taking a hit is pretty detrimental. Where the hammer does shine is when you put it to the test against the mutants. It's typically only a 1 or 2 hit kill, making you feel like a goddamn powerhouse. The charge ability essentially turns these guys into jam, and I'm not gonna lie, it's really goddamn satisfying. Fighting the biophage with this thing never got old, but encounters really focus on the biobots once you get the hammer, and these guys take just as many swings as the biophage do with the stun baton. So you never really feel like you got a massive power upgrade most of the time. They also added a new gimmicky box breaking mechanic so you can use the hammer to clear hallways of yellow boxes. Honestly, I'm not sure why they did this. I don't know if it was to ground the tool in the world so it's not just a weapon, but it felt completely unnecessary because the crates don't offer anything. They just kind of impede your progress. They also added a new puzzle, a lockpick kind of mechanic, but it's nothing really special. You only do it like 3 times. So I was really excited to see the final boss because I thought it was going to be some human/robot monstrosity. At the beginning of the DLC, Mahler makes a comment about how one of her experiments escaped, and then she tells you to avoid it, but fight it if you must.
So what is that thing?
It held one of my experiments. It broke free when systems failed. Avoid it if you can. Fight it if you must.
I think this is supposed to be the chair Jacob is in, and it's her way of blocking Jacob from seeing his condition, but it does allude to something way more sinister, and you don't really ever get that. The biobots were such a prevalent entity in the last half of this expansion, so it's a shame they didn't do something more with them. The final boss fight we get is a mutated Mahler, and I guess I get it, right? She's the reason for his suffering, so it makes sense for her to be manifested in his mind as this roadblock to his peace. While it wasn't the boss I was expecting, her overall design and fight are actually well done for the most part. She does share some similarities with everyone's favorite boss fight, Two-Head, in terms of looks, but this boss fight does have some variety with long-ranged attacks, charge moves, and ground slams. Unlike the Two-Head encounters, this fight is melee focused with weapons coming into play during times when weak spots are visible. Overall, it's the best boss fight in the entire game, because you're not just doing the same thing over and over. But it does have one problem, at least for me. So I mentioned before that I played this on maximum security, meaning that 2 hits can pretty much outright kill you no problem with a full health bar. The melee focused combat is built around being defensive, only striking when you have an opening. All of the attacks in the game are made to be able to dodge them in some capacity. However, Mahler has a ground slam attack that casts a wide area of effect, and it's really not possible to just dodge it unless you can run out of the way in time. These attacks are blockable, but blocking them will still take health away. It doesn't help that these attacks can just come from range charges or up close strikes when you're going toe to toe with her. They don't follow a specific pattern either. These attacks can be dealt upwards of like 3 times in a row, and that's enough to kill you depending on what your health is at. I must have died 9 times during this fight. Honestly, a few times were just me being dumb, and that's totally on me. That's not the game's fault. But there were definitely a handful of times that felt entirely cheap because this attack can't be interrupted unless you're throwing explosive canisters at her, and that only works if she's across the room. Despite my criticism, I still do think that this is the best boss fight in the entire game. Now, I want to talk about this DLC's psychological horror angle because I think it excels in this area, and it proves to me that if the main game had taken this route, it would have gone up a couple notches. Psychological horror allows a lot of freedom in how scares and tension are built, because you can pretty much do whatever the hell you want. Final Transmission has an unsettling atmosphere and some really great visual sequences that led to me being confused and pretty scared. Engaging in combat with enemies that weren't actually there added this whole level of unpredictability, and it really leans into this psychological angle in the last 30 minutes, and it's just all the better for it, and I wish they had went into this in the base game. Oh, that got me. So before I end this video, I also wanted to touch on the additions to lore in this, because I think they added some intriguing ideas as long as it wasn't all in Jacob's head. If you take the time to really listen to those logs, you find that they hint at a better understanding of the biophage. Mahler explains that the biophage is not just a pathogen, but a sentient being with some form of intelligence. Seeing how it was able to adapt to robotic circuitry and take control of electronics, it could very well be able to drive vehicles and fly ships in the future. If this is the case and is able to learn and control things outside of biological tissue, it could open a whole world of possibility for what Striking Distance Studio has built. I mean, maybe I'm just thinking too much into it, but I really hope not. Now, if anything, Final Transmission showed me that Striking Distance Studios has it in them to improve and come back with something better. Launching a brand new game set in its own universe would be a huge undertaking, and it has got to be incredibly difficult. But these first steps are necessary for adapting and becoming better. While the future of Callisto looks bleak, I'm excited to see what they bring us in the future.
So there you have it. That is my in-depth review of Callisto Protocol's final and only story DLC. Not great, but good. And I hope we get more, but it's not, I don't think that's gonna happen. So anyway, thank you all for watching. I love you all. And if you want to see my Let's Play of it, because I just did a whole playthrough, that's on my other channel, and that'll be in the description below. Thank you. Peace out.